Beyond compliance, the role of ethics in commercial practice. As we continue building toward full professional mastery, it is important to recognize that compliance alone is not enough. While laws and regulations establish minimum standards, ethics define the level at which a true professional operates. Ethical decision-making is what guides agents in situations where the law may not provide a clear answer. In commercial real estate, where transactions are complex and often involve large financial stakes, ethical judgment becomes a critical skill. This section builds directly on compliance from Section 6.2 and introduces the next level of professional responsibility. Understanding fiduciary duties in commercial transactions. At the core of ethical practice are fiduciary duties owed to clients. These duties include loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, obedience, accounting, and reasonable care. Arizona case law, including Jennings v. Lee, reinforces that agents must act in the best interest of their client and fully disclose material information. For example, if a commercial agent knows that a property is overpriced based on market data, they must advise their client accordingly, even if it could jeopardize the transaction. Fiduciary duty requires putting the client's interests above the agent's own. Balancing duties to clients and obligations to all parties. One of the most challenging aspects of commercial real estate is balancing fiduciary duties to a client with the obligation to deal honestly with all parties. Under AAC R4 28-1101, agents must not mislead or misrepresent facts, even when advocating for their client. For example, an agent representing a seller cannot conceal known defects from a buyer, even if doing so might help the deal close. This balance requires strong ethical judgment and a clear understanding of professional responsibilities, conflict of interest, recognizing and managing risk. Conflicts of interest are common in commercial transactions, especially when agents have multiple relationships or financial interests involved. A conflict of interest may arise when an agent represents both buyer and seller, an agent has a financial interest in the property, an agent has a personal relationship with one of the parties. In these situations, full disclosure and informed consent are required. For example, if an agent is involved in both sides of a commercial deal, they must clearly explain the limitations of limited representation and obtain written consent from all parties. Failure to properly manage conflicts can lead to serious legal and ethical issues. Case law application. Ethical lessons from the courts. Arizona case law provides valuable insight into ethical obligations. In Hill v. Jones, the court emphasized the duty to disclose known material defects. While the case involved residential property, the principle applies equally to commercial transactions. In Lombardo v. Albu, the court highlighted that material information affecting a party's ability to perform must be disclosed, even if it involves sensitive financial details. These cases reinforce that ethical conduct is closely tied to disclosure and honesty, pressure, negotiation, and ethical boundaries. Commercial transactions often involve high-pressure environments where agents may feel tempted to push ethical boundaries. Examples include exaggerating property performance, withholding negative information, pressuring clients to accept unfavorable terms. Ethical agents recognize these pressures and maintain professional integrity. For example, if a seller insists on hiding information about a pending tenant vacancy, the agent must refuse and advise proper disclosure. Protecting your license and reputation always outweighs closing a deal. Confidentiality versus disclosure, navigating a common dilemma. One of the most complex ethical challenges is balancing confidentiality with disclosure obligations. Agents must protect confidential client information while also ensuring that material facts are disclosed to other parties. For example, if a buyer shares financial concerns with their agent, that information is confidential. However, if those concerns impact the buyer's ability to perform, disclosure may be required under case law, such as Lombardo v. Albu. This requires careful analysis and, in some cases, consultation with a broker or legal professional. Professional reputation, your most valuable asset. In commercial real estate, reputation is everything. Clients, investors, and other agents rely on trust when entering into transactions. Ethical behavior builds long-term relationships and repeat business. For example, an agent known for honesty and transparency is more likely to be trusted in negotiations and complex deals. On the other hand, unethical behavior can quickly damage a career and limit future opportunities. Your reputation is built one transaction at a time. Ethical decision-making framework. A practical approach. To navigate complex situations, agents can use a simple decision-making framework. Identify the issue, review applicable laws and rules, consider fiduciary duties, evaluate potential outcomes, consult with your broker if needed. This structured approach helps ensure that decisions align with both legal requirements and ethical standards. For example, if faced with a disclosure dilemma, an agent can walk through each step to determine the appropriate course of action. This framework reinforces consistency and professionalism, connecting ethics to compliance and the transaction lifecycle. When we connect this section to the previous sections, the full picture becomes clear. Compliance establishes the rules ethics guide decision-making. The transaction lifecycle provides the structure. Together, these elements form a complete and professional real estate practice. Ethics are not separate from the transaction. They are embedded in every step. Preparing for final integration. This section represents the final layer of professional development before we move into full course integration. You now understand not only how transactions work and how to remain compliant, but also how to make sound ethical decisions in complex situations. In the final section, we will bring everything together, combining agency, contracts, disclosure, compliance, and ethics into one complete system for success in commercial real estate. Online discussion. Why is ethical decision-making important even when laws are followed? Answer. Because laws set minimum standards, but ethical decision-making ensures higher levels of professionalism, trust, and long-term success. What is a common conflict of interest in commercial real estate? Answer. Representing both the buyer and seller in the same transaction without proper disclosure and consent. How should an agent handle pressure to hide negative information about a property? Answer. The agent must refuse and ensure proper disclosure, prioritizing ethical obligations and legal compliance over closing the deal.